Hey new Tekken players, hope everyone is doing well. This is a re-upload of my anti-Hwoarang guide, as although I was really pleased with how the video came out, the sound quality was awful as my mic had died, so I'm redoing it with the new mic. Today I want to talk about Hwoarang and how we generally counter him in the lower ranks. Matchup knowledge is always important in Tekken, but I think Hwoarang might be the most powerful character if you don't know the matchup, which is why I think he gets a lot of complaints of being OP, so he's definitely a character worth taking the time to learn. Just before I continue, I just want to say another big thank you to all of you who have subscribed so far. If you like these anti-character guides, let me know in the comments who you'd like to see next. If you're new to the channel or you're new to Tekken generally, I strongly recommend first hitting the sub button and then going away and watching my how to counter low rank spam video. This will get you up to speed with the general terminology and knowledge of Tekken, which will help you follow along with this anti-Hwoarang guide. There should be a card in the corner and a link in the description. I mentioned in that previous video that Hwoarang could warrant his own counter guide, so that's why I decided to make this video. From here on in, I'm just going to refer to him as Ho to keep it easier. Although there's a lot of anti-Ho videos out there, I find most of them are very long and really only look into high level and high ranked players, and I don't think they target those newer players to Tekken. PeterYMao probably has the best guide for newbies in my opinion, and so I'm stealing a lot of that to make my own, so be sure to check it out. Again, links on the screen and in the description. Also, I just wanted to get a few caveats out of the way in relation to the rest of the video. Number 1, as no doubt some of you have noticed from my previous videos and gameplay footage, I am not an amazing Tekken player in general. But that said, I do know what it's like to struggle in the low ranks, so please bear that in mind if I get something wrong within this guide, or my Tekken knowledge far outweighs my actual execution. Number 2, everything I'm about to say is aimed at new and generally lower ranked players, so there will be a lot of high level knowledge such as details about Hwoarang's stances etc. that I won't cover, but I really recommend PeterYMao's videos on the subject as they're really clear and really well edited. 3. Finally, everything I'm saying is in general terms to cover the majority of players, but there are always exceptions to the rule. So for example, if I say Ho is an aggressive rushdown character, of course some players can play him with amazing defense and patience. Ultimately, it's the player who controls the character and not the other way round. So with all that out of the way, let's learn how to counter Hwoarang. As cited by That Blasted Salami,
is a relentless rushdown character who blitzes opponents with a torrent of kicks before knocking them off their feet with some devastating mix-ups.
Ho is an aggressive rushdown character for those players who love to hit buttons. This means he has a large amount of mix-ups with high damage launching mids and lows that knock you down, plus crazy amounts of plus frames on his moves. Which means you never really know when it's your turn to fight back. In general though, he can be very risky to play at lower levels, where if you know when to duck or punish, his 50-50s will become risky for your opponent as well. Strengths. Insane pressure with a significant amount of his moves are to actually plus and block. Strong mix-ups to either launch you or knock you down. Arguably the best power crush in the game in the form of Backlash. Fantastic whiff and long range punishment with his back 3. Weaknesses. Most of his approach tools are quite linear or unsafe. Often seen as high risk, high reward and therefore unsafe in general. Most of his best moves are locked behind stances or good execution. Players can sometimes over-rely on flowcharts and setups and so may lack general defense and fundamentals. So, because Hwoarang is a rushdown character, your best strategy is to use keep out, as generally keep out beats rushdown in a fighting game. For me personally, I do much better against Hwoarang if I'm playing with Paul or Kaz, despite King being my main, as Paul and Kaz have much better keep out and defense options compared to King, or at least that could just be the way I play him. This is something new players can really struggle with, as often players in low rank see attack as the best form of defence, but you will never out button bash a half decent Hwoarang player because his frames are so strong, so you really need to learn to be patient and learn the matchup and weaknesses in his moves. So, we mentioned that keep out beats rushdown, but what do we mean by keep out? Well, generally speaking, to play a keep out strategy is to create space from your opponent and then stop them from getting close and starting up their pressure and offence, and either use good counter hit tools or whiff punishments. In general, a good keep out move is generally fast in both startup and recovery, has good counter hit properties and a good long range hitbox. Using these keep out moves after we've created space can be super effective against Hwoarang players, as they generally need to get up close to engage you with their mix-ups and string pressure. You will need to find out what your own character's keep out moves and strategy is like, but let's look at a few good examples. With Mishimi's, EWGF or Electrics are the most obvious, as each recovers super quick, a plus and block, and will launch. With Paul, he has a quad circle back 4, and Brian has a 3+4. Both of these moves give huge damage on counter hit and have an insane amount of range. In addition to playing keep out by using space on a linear level, Hwo's approach tools are very often beaten by sidestepping and walking. Now, I know the idea of sidesteps and sidewalks can be quite daunting for new players, especially if Tekken is your first 3D fighting game. But I promise learning to sidestep Hwoarang will reap you huge rewards for not much effort, especially in this range. So let's look at this in detail. In these ranks, if you can create space between you and the Hwo player, his best approach tools are forward forward 4, running 3, and up forward 3-4. Notice all of these are beaten by a simple sidestep. Hwo is one of the few characters when very often I will start the round by immediately sidewalking, which is amazingly effective. Remember, in general the Hwo player wants to hit buttons first to get the dance of death started, which is why movement early in the match can be super effective. Regarding which way you should step, the rule of thumb is to sidewalk or sidestep in the direction his stomach is facing, like this. So, in addition to playing keep out, what other general strategy should we adopt? Well, as I mentioned in the overview, Hwo is generally quite an unsafe character. He is limited to safe normal hit launches in his generic downfall 2 and his just frame skyrocket, which requires pretty good execution to do consistently. So, it's crucial you learn what moves are unsafe, both standing and ducking, and then punish them hard. Not only will this score you damage, but it will make the Hwo player think twice about using them against you if he or she realises they are risky to do. Finally, I mentioned in the strengths and weaknesses that Hwo players rely on flowcharts. Please understand that I'm not being deliberately rude about Hwo players when I say this. I've tried to play Hwo to make this guide, and he is an insanely complicated character to play, so his design is that you play string A into stance X, into string C, into move Y. So flowcharting is kind of part of the game plan when playing Hwo, and some of them can be devastating. That said, if you clock onto their patterns, then you can quite easily know how to counter them. I mentioned Hwo matchup knowledge probably offers the most reward. I would say the same thing goes to rematching. The more you play against a Hwo player, the easier you will find it to beat him or her, because eventually you will learn their flowcharts and their habits. So, now we've been through the more general approach to Hwo, let's look at some specific moves and strings that you need to counter. Okay, now we've got the general overview and strategy, let's look at some specific moves and setups to put into practice mode and learn how to deal with them. Back 3. This is a fantastic mid launcher that has enough range to punish moves like Death Fist or Heihachi's forward forward 2. It is however minus 19 and so it's very much launch punishable, so make sure you make them pay for throwing this out randomly. Back 1. This is a super evasive panic move that will often get thrown out after you've blocked a string. It is however minus 14, so if you main Paul or Brian or a Mishima, launch them for throwing this shit out. One, 1, 3, 3. This is a string that is high, high, low, high. If the low hits you, then you will eat the final high. So what you need to do is deduct the third low, and then the last high, and then launch punish. You can also low parry the third hit if you don't think they'll commit to the whole string. Down forward 3, 4. This is a power crush move often spammed on approach. Again, it is minus 14 with a little bit of pushback, but make sure you punish it as hard as you can. Down 4, 4. There is a lot of pushback on the second hit, so you can't really punish it. However, the second hit is a high and can be ducked even if the low hits you, so always make sure you duck and punish this. Now, I mentioned at the start that I wasn't going to overcomplicate this guy with all of Hwo's stances. For the record, he has 4 which are his regular, his right foot forward, left flamingo, and right flamingo. Now, I promise I will keep this simple, but some of his most powerful moves and mix-ups are locked behind these stances, so we do need to mention them. Let's start with the right foot forward, which leads to Backlash. Backlash is a homing, plus and block, launching power crush move that is, to be honest, utter bullshit in my opinion. There are 3 crucial weaknesses to this move. The first that it's a high, the second is that it's locked behind his right foot forward stance, and the third is that it's a power crush move, which are beaten by lows and throws. Before we look at how to counter the move, let's look at the stance and the moves Hwo has to do to get into the stance, all of which will help us learn to predict when the move is going to come out. So, this is his right foot forward stance, both feet on the floor with his right foot forward. If you play P1, this means you can see Hwo's stomach. If you're on player 2, this means you can see Hwo's back. He can switch into the stance all by itself just by pressing 2 buttons, which is the most likely scenario you'll see in these ranks, so learn to spot this animation and get ready for Backlash to come out after you've seen it. The second most likely setup in these ranks is forward forward 4. This is because it not only closes the gap, but it also puts him in his right foot forward stance, so Backlash will power through any moves that you try to do in retaliation. So those 2 are the most common transitions in these ranks, but there are some others that you may want to be aware of, which are Okay, so now we know when Backlash is likely to come out, so how do we counter it? Well, this is character specific, but bear with me. If your character has a 13 frame while standing launch, which is basically either Kaz, Josie, Ellie or Akuma, then I'd recommend ducking then launching. In theory, you can launch Backlash with slower moves, but the recovery time of Backlash is stupidly fast, and once you take into account reaction time plus online lag, you need to be close to damn near frame perfect inputs to be able to launch with anything that's slower or quicker than 13 frames. If you don't have a 13 frame launcher, then you have to exploit the other weaknesses in power crush moves, which are they are beaten by both throws and lows. So if you play a grappler and you think Backlash is coming, use your best throw when the animation starts. If you have a string that contains a low early on, the low will break the power crush and you'll get all the rest of the string for juicy damage. If you have a high crushing low, that is a low move that goes under highs, and even better if it launches on counter hit, this will be a fantastic move to use against Backlash. So like I mentioned at the start, how you deal with Backlash will be character specific, but the key thing is to learn when it's likely to come out and then punish your opponent hard for using this bullshit move. Finally, we need to talk about down 3-4. Again, for these ranks I'll keep this as simple as possible. But just be aware there are many options that I won't be able to cover with this string, but I'd highly recommend checking out Kwis, who is one of the best Hwoarang players in the world, and his video all about down 3-4 if you really want to learn everything about the subject.
It's different and not every character can launch it, but there are good options that a lot of the cast do have to deal with down 3-4 once you've got those hits. You know, there's once you find your character's option, you'll be having a good time.
To keep it simple, this is a low-high string where if the low hits you, then the high is guaranteed. If it hits, first of all, you are super minus, so don't even dream about pressing buttons. And second, it leads Ho into his right flamingo stance. From this stance, plus all the lovely plus frames he now has, he has got multiple mix-up options at his disposal. Again, like Backlash, let's look at how to avoid getting hit by down 3-4 in the first place. First of all, it is quite linear, and so sidestepping will evade it. Second, as mentioned, it is low-high, so in theory, you can block the low, duck the high, and then while standing punish it. However, like Backlash, I would only suggest doing this if you have a 13 frame while standing launcher. For everyone else, you'll have to see what your own character's options are. But if in doubt, use while standing 4 or a down jab. Now you may not score much damage, but you will knock Ho out of the stance and therefore you'll avoid the mix-up. If you do get hit by down 3-4, Ho has 2 mid launchers and a hell sweep to mix you up. Sometimes the only thing you can do is guess, but what is absolutely crucial is that if you do guess correctly, then you always punish. I know this sounds obvious, but you have to make the 50-50 risky for your opponent as well as for you. Both mids can be punished with your 10 frame punish. And the hell sweep is stupidly minus on block, so punish this hard. The only other thing I would mention is that if your back is near a wall or a balcony, the hell sweep is probably the more likely option to come out. Well, hopefully you now have a better understanding of Ho and how to counter him. I highly recommend going into practice mode to learn to punish the scrub stuff, and then work on your defense and keep out game in general. I can't stress enough how important it is to punish properly. If you let your opponent keep getting away with launches or strings that aren't punished, then he or she will just keep doing them. But if you can punish them properly, you'll completely make them think twice about throwing them out, and then you will have the advantage. Be sure to check out the other guides on my channel, and if you think I've deserved it, please drop a like or consider subscribing. Also, if there's any other anti-character guides you'd like to see, drop a comment below and I'll look into it. Thanks guys, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.